Chapter 4 Chords of the Universe. Anastasia spoke warmly about you, Alexander continued. She knew all about people and events. She told him that the first book he wrote came out in Moscow in a small print run, and it immediately led to enthusiastic reviews, poetry, paintings, and songs. She said that thanks to the sincerity of the writing, the book preserved the combinations and symbols she had sought out in the universe, and these were what aroused the extraordinary beneficial Panasian feelings in people. When Boris Moisevich heard that, he began fidgeting and abruptly sat down at the table by the tent. I noticed he was surreptitiously trying to switch on a tape recorder. He was probably so caught up with the pursuit of important information that he completely forgot about everyone else around. He didn't even offer Anastasia a chair. He was so bent on extracting as much information from her as he could, and quickly. This old grey-haired fellow was excited and fired off more questions. Scientists in many countries of the world are trying to capture the extraordinary sounds of the universe with their costly specialized equipment. These sounds are out there. They are known to science. Maybe not all of them, just a few for the time being. Maybe just a billionth part of the whole. What devices do you use to capture them, Anastasia? What equipment will allow us to select the sounds that can exert an effective influence on the human mind? The equipment one needs has existed for a long time already. It's called the human soul. The attitude and purity of the soul will accept or reject sounds from the universe. Okay, fine, okay. Let's assume you've managed to find and select from the billions of sounds the best that the universe has to offer, and then recombine them in the right way. But sound can only be reproduced with the help of a device or a particular musical instrument. What's the point of a book then? After all, it can't make sounds. You are right, a book does not make sounds, but it can serve as a score, like a musical score. The reader will involuntarily utter within himself any sounds he reads. Thus, the hidden combinations in the text will resonate in the reader's soul in their pristine form with no distortion. They are bearers of truth and healing, and they will fill the soul with inspiration. No artificial instrument is capable of reproducing what resonates in the soul. How did Vladimir manage to preserve all your combinations if he himself knew nothing about them? I took note of Vladimir's speech patterns. Besides, I knew in advance that Vladimir would not distort the essence of the events or what he heard, that he would even present himself just the way he was, but he did not convey all the combinations of signs. He needed to carry on writing. After all, he set forth only a fraction of what he knew and was trying to make sense of when he started to write. He needed to continue with the writing. And he has already been touched by fame, an unprecedented fame at that. It would have taken only a little more effort to organise the Fellowship of Entrepreneurs. But then, all of a sudden, he took another step my dream did not anticipate. He left his Moscow apartment, on which the rent was already paid, to his Moscow entourage. He left to them the privilege of receiving compliments from readers, while he himself boarded a train and headed out of town. Why did he do that? He had been wanting all along to seek out confirmation of some of the things I had said, scientific confirmation of the existence of various phenomena I had talked about, to investigate them. That is why he decided not to write any more for the time being, and so he went off to the Caucasus. He left Moscow to see the dolmens in the Caucasus with his own eyes, the ancient structures where living people went in to die 10,000 years ago. I had told him about them. I also told him about the important functional significance these dolmens have for people living today. Vladimir came to the city known as Galenzik, in the museum there, along with museums in Krasnodar and Novorossiysk. He collected material on the dolmens. Then he met with various scientists, archaeologists, and local ethnographers who were studying the dolmens. He ended up with considerably more information on them than was available in any one museum. Naturally, I tried to help him inconspicuously. I used the mouths of people who came to see Vladimir to inculcate a good deal of new information in him, so that he would have the opportunity to make his conclusions. But he also did this part by acting quickly and decisively. This was after he had compared all the information he had gathered with what I had told him, after the archaeologists had shown him the dolmens closest to the road, and he discovered that there were others, but that they had fallen into ruin for lack of proper attention from the local residents. The local people had never been much interested in them. Vladimir then did something that might seem incredible. In 3 months he managed to change the attitude of the local residents toward the dolmens. They began bringing flowers. The women ethnographers of the Gelendzhik Museum set up a public association which they called Anastasia in my honour. This association opened a school for tour guides in order to get the right message out to tourists about the dolmens, so they would preserve and take care of the dolmens instead of destroying them. In addition, they began organising new tours which they called excursions into reason. The tour guides at Gelendzhik began telling everyone about the significance of our pristine origins and about the works of the Grand Creator, about nature. Anastasia, do you think that this was all because of him? Didn't you play a part here? If I could have done as much as this without him, I would have done it long ago. I very much wanted to. It is in one of the distant dolmens in these mountains that my foremother's flesh approached its death. But how? How did one man, a nobody, manage to change people's attitudes in so short a time? And how could he have set up such an active association? You say that the local residents had access to scientific materials and all sorts of publications, since people knew about them at the museums, but they didn't pay any attention. That is correct. They knew about them, but they did not pay attention. But why did they then listen to him? How did he manage to pull it off? You can't change people's consciousness that quickly. But Vladimir did not know that. He did not know that consciousness cannot be changed quickly, and that is why he acted and in fact changed it. Go visit that city. Ask the different people who joined the association. Find out how and why fortune smiled on Vladimir. I was thrilled by what was happening there. The Anastasia Association. He agreed to the name when they asked him about it. I thought he did it for me, that he was beginning to understand me and love me, and he really has managed to grasp a great deal. But he's not fallen in love with me. He has not done so because of my many mistakes and transgressions. I soon began to figure this out. I began to realise that my dream was actually coming true, and that people would indeed be transported across the Dark Force's window of time, and that people would be happy, that what I dreamt about would come true, except that my love for him was not to be requited. And this was payment for the many mistakes I had made, my lack of perfection, and my own insufficient purity of thought. What happened? What made you come to that conclusion? Boris Moisevich queried. In any case, everybody's known for a long time how coarse and uncivilized this fellow is. Believe me, Anastasia, as your senior and as the father of a family, I can tell you that your parents would not have approved of such a union. I beg you, do not talk that way about one who is so dear to me. Regardless of how coarse Vladimir may appear to some people, I know differently. What else is there to know about him? Everybody knows what kind of people entrepreneurs are, and he's just a typical example of the species. That's clear to all, Anastasia. I must say you have a rather biased opinion of Vladimir. No matter, it is still my opinion. Besides, your assumption regarding my parents' view is wrong. The end of chapter 4. Chapter 5. the spirit of a foremother. I realised it one morning, Anastasia said quietly, and her gaze looked as though it were immersing itself in the past. A morning when Vladimir was not at home in the flat he had rented temporarily. I could not find him with my ray. It was the morning of the day when my foremother went into a dolmen to die many centuries ago. I always think of her on that anniversary. I try to talk with her, and she talks with me. You people are accustomed as well to going to the cemetery on a day you remember your loved ones, to think about them, even talk with them. I can do this without leaving my glade. My ray helps me both see and talk at a distance, and they can feel my ray. On that day I was thinking about my foremother, trying to talk with her as usual, but I could not sense any reply from her. None at all. She was not responding to me. This had never happened before. Then I tried to locate her dolmen with my ray. I found it. I shone my ray upon it with all my might. My foremother did not respond. Something had happened I did not know about. My foremother's spirit was not in the dolmen. Anastasia, please explain what you mean by someone's spirit. What does it consist of? It consists of all the unseen elements of a man, including certain passions and sensations acquired during the period of existence in the flesh. Does the spirit possess an energy analogous to any of the energies we know of? That is correct. It is an energy complex consisting of a multitude of different energies. After the end of a human individual's fleshly existence, certain of these complexes break up into separate energies which are subsequently used in plant and animal aggregates, as well as in essential natural phenomena. What kind of power do they have? What is the energy potential of unbroken complexes? They vary from individual to individual. The weakest ones cannot even overcome gravitational energy. They will later fall apart no matter what. Gravitational, you say? The weakest ones? Is it possible to see their presence in anything at all, to touch it, feel it? Of course, in a tornado, for example. A tornado? You mean a tornado which rips trees up by the roots and overturns things? Then what kind of energy do the strongest ones have? The strongest? Well, that would be him. I cannot fully fathom the strength of his energy. Then let's say somewhere in between, something average. The energy complex of many average spirits already contains a released mental energy. What would the strength or energy potential of an average complex like? What would be the strength or energy potential of an average complex like this? I already told you, it contains released mental energy. What does that mean? What can it be compared to? How would you define it? To what can it be compared? A definition. Tell me, what is the most powerful energy that your mind, your thought, or consciousness can imagine? The energy of a nuclear explosion? No, rather the energy of the reactions taking place at the sun's core. Everything you've named is equivalent to but a tiny fraction of released mental energy. As for definitions, those are things you think up yourselves to use in verbal communication with each other. Not a single definition you have ever thought of is applicable here. You can use the ones you are familiar with if you multiply them to the power of infinity. Tell me, what is the strength of your foremother's energy? It contains released mental energy. How did you find out about your foremother? How and where did she die? After all, that happened 10,000 years ago. That information about my foremother, who went into the dolmen to die, was passed down from generation to generation of her descendants. Did your mother tell you about her? I was only an infant when my mother perished. I was not capable of taking in that kind of information. My grandfather and great-grandfather told me all about my foremothers. Can her spirit be seen with normal human vision? Partially, if one changes one's spectral perception along with one's inner rhythm. Is that possible? The phenomenon you know as Daltonism suggests that it is possible. You don't think beyond the will of man, that it is merely a disease, But that is not so. You said your ancestor, your foremother, was worthy enough to have information transmitted from generation to generation over the millennia. What makes this information so valuable? Mother was the last from our pristine origins who knew what a wunk about during the breastfeeding of an infant and had the so. Civilization was gradually losing sight of the knowledge 10,000 years ago, and it has all but disappeared completely today. My foremother was by no means an old woman, but she went into the dolmen to die in order to preserve all this knowledge of our pristine origins. And when people's awareness begins to be restored, people will become aware of the need to transmit this knowledge to nursing mothers. And after that, they will help each other learn everything. Through her death in the dolmen, my foremother learned even greater truths that women need to know. Why did she decide to go into a dolmen? How does a dolmen differ from the usual kind of stone tomb? And why did she not wait until she was old before going into the dolmen to die? Was she motivated by an awareness of her goal or simply by superstition? Back then, they had already begun paying less attention to the breastfeeding of infants, and women were not offered the opportunity of entering a dolmen, even if they wished to. The aging leader revered my foremother and comprehended that if he did not accede to her request, the leader-to-be would not listen to her at all, and her intentions he might well dismiss as mere fancy. But the menfolk could not be compelled by their leader to build my foremother a dolmen, and so he gave her his own. The men did not approve of the leader's decision and refused to lift the stone slab covering the top so she could go in. So the women got together as one and all night long tried to lift the slab of heavy stone. The next morning at dawn, the old leader came. He did not do much walking anymore, yet still he came, leaning on his staff. The old leader smiled at the women, said some encouraging words, whereupon the heavy slab yielded to the women's upward thrust, and my foremother went in. And how does a dolmen differ from an ordinary stone tomb? There is not much difference outwardly, but the dolmen, as you call this stone tomb, was a place where living people went to die. The dolmen was not simply a religious structure, as people tend to think today. It is a monument to wisdom and the great self-sacrifice of one's spirit for the sake of future generations. Even today it has a significant functional purpose. And the death experienced in one of these dolmens was not an ordinary one. Actually, the word death is not at all appropriate here. I can imagine, Boris Moisevich said, a living person entombed in a stone chamber. That is really extraordinary. It must have been an extremely torturous death. The people who went into the dolmens did not suffer. The peculiarity of their death lay in the fact that they meditated. They meditated on eternity, and in spirit they would remain forever on the earth and even hold on to certain earthly feelings. But the soul of those who went into a dolmen to die was forever deprived of the possibility of material re-embodiment on the earth. How did they meditate? You're aware today, especially from the ancient Oriental religions, of what a meditation is. And there are teachings today that can help one become acquainted with a small fraction of the phenomenon of meditation, but not, unfortunately, with its underlying purpose. And today there are people who are capable of meditating, temporarily separating part of their spirit from their body and then returning it to the body. Through the help of meditation in the dolmen, even while the body was still active, the spirit completely separated itself and returned many times while the flesh was still living. After that, the spirit remained forever in the dolmen. all alone, it would eternally wait for visitors to impart to them the wisdom of our pristine origins. Even if the flesh succeeded in living a while longer, it was still cloistered. But while it was alive, the spirit had the freedom to travel back and forth between the different dimensions, which afforded it the opportunity of analysing at incredible speed, according to your calculations, the truth that was available, as though clarifying the truth for itself. One who died or entered into eternal meditation through the dolmen knew that his soul or spirit would never again be able to take on a material form. It would never again be able to embody itself in earthly flesh or matter. It would never be able to go far from the dolmen or leave it for any length of time, but it would have the ability to communicate with a particle of the soul of a person living in the flesh who had come to visit the dolmen. And if you talk about a torturous death, about suffering in general, in this case the torture lies in the fact that for millennia now nobody has come to acquire this knowledge. The great tragedy of the dolmens is the utter lack of demand, the same demand for which... Anastasia, Boris Moisevich interrupted. How important do you feel it is for nursing mothers to have this knowledge and ability? Extremely important, she replied. But why? After all, mother's milk feeds only the flesh of an infant. Not only the flesh. It is capable of transmitting a huge quantity of information, as well as a keen sensitivity. You must be aware, after all, that every substance includes its own kind of information, its own radiance and vibration. Yes, I know, but how can mother's milk transmit sensitivity? It can. It is extremely sensitive. It is inextricably linked to the feelings of the mother. The taste of the milk can change according to her feelings, and stress can even cause the milk to congeal or stop coming altogether. Yes, that can indeed happen, it can. And you say nobody comes to visit your foremother? That means nobody's come over many thousands of years. At first people came, mainly the generations of relatives and people living there. After that, a series of cataclysms began happening on the earth. People began migrating. The dolmen remained where it was. But over the past millennia, nobody has come to visit my foremother to find out. Now the dolmens are all being laid waste, because people do not know. In the Taiga, when I first told Vladimir about the dolmens and my foremother, he said that perhaps he would go visit her dolmen. Then I explained how it was impossible for him to comprehend or feel my foremother's spirit and accept the information she had to give. Men simply did not know the feelings and sensations inherent in a nursing mother. All these millennia my foremother has been waiting for women, not men, to come to see her. But no women have come to her dolmen, and I am the only one to communicate with her once a year, and on that particular day I wanted to be in contact with her and tell her something good, but I could not. My foremother's spirit was not anywhere close to the dolmen. I had no idea why, and began quickly searching with my ray all around in a constantly widening radius. And then all at once I found her in a ravine among the rocks. Vladimir was lying on the rocks unconscious, and my foremother, her spirit, was bending over Vladimir, taking form as a conglomeration of invisible energies. I realized then what had happened. I had known even earlier that Vladimir was looking for guides to take him to the dolmens located far away from the main road, but he could not find any. No one would volunteer to accompany him, and so Vladimir decided to go into the mountains alone. At one point he fell off the path into a ravine. He was wearing ordinary shoes, not suitable for mountain hiking. In fact, he did not have any mountain gear at all. He wanted to be convinced that the dolmens really existed. He wanted to touch them, and so he went into the mountains alone. On my foremother's memorial day, he went to the dolmens located far away from the road. My foremother did not know why this poorly equipped person had come into the mountains, and she kept her eye on him. And when he slipped and started falling, she suddenly, like a subtle mass of air, her spirit swept down to his side. My foremother saved Vladimir's life. While he did not actually strike his head on a rock, the many bruises he received in the fall caused him to lose consciousness. My foremother used her subtle air mass to hold up his head, as though supporting it with her hands, and waited for him to regain consciousness. That was why she did not speak with me. Even when Vladimir's consciousness returned, she still did not go back to her dolmen. She remained in the ravine down below. She stayed to watch Vladimir's climb back up on the path. Later I realised that my foremother was actually on the path, since stones began rolling out of the way. That was her doing. She had taken on the form of a subtle breeze, sweeping the stones away from the mountain path. She wanted to help Vladimir in his descent. I very much wanted to do the same, and so I began to ever so quickly move along the path with my ray, so that it wouldn't be so wet and slippery, and Vladimir could get safely back to the place he was staying and treat his wounds. Once Vladimir had climbed back up from the ravine, he sat down on the path and examined the sketch of one of the archaeologists at the Novorossiysk Museum had drawn up for him. Then he got up and started walking with a limp, but not downward along the dry path that had now been cleared of stones, but the opposite way, upward. I was shocked at this unexpected turn of events, and I believe my foremother did not immediately grasp his intentions either. At this point, he left the path altogether and clambered through a thicket of thorny bushes. I realised he was trying to reach my foremother's dolmen. He succeeded. He sat down on the portico in front of the dolmen at the edge of one of the stone slabs and began unbuttoning his jacket. His arm hurt, and it took him a long time. When his jacket was completely unbuttoned, I could see he had a bouquet of flowers underneath. 3 little roses. The stems of 2 of them were broken. The flowers had been damaged when he fell into the ravine and struck the rocks. Some of the thorns on the stems were blood-covered. He placed the damaged roses on the dolmen's portico and lit a cigarette. And then he said, "Too bad the flowers got mashed. These flowers are for you, my beauty. You must have been a real beauty, just like Anastasia. You were smart and kind. You wanted to tell our women all about breastfeeding children. Only they have no idea you exist. And the fact that your dolmen is so far off the beaten path makes it difficult for women to get here." Then Vladimir took a shallow little flask of brandy and 2 little metal goblets and pulled out a fistful of squashed candies from his pocket. He poured brandy into the goblets. He drank one of them, placed the other on the dolmen's portico, covering it with a piece of candy, and said, "This is for you, my beauty." Vladimir did everything people do today at cemeteries when they come to see their loved ones or dear friends. As for my foremother, her spirit kept sweeping around him in the form of invisible energy mass. She was distraught and did not know what to do. She tried to show some kind of response to Vladimir's words, tried congealing the air into the shape of her body, but her outlines were transparent and barely noticeable. Vladimir did not notice them. He could not see or hear anything. She kept on trying her best to explain everything to him, but could only sweep back and forth in frustration. At one point, her air mass lightly touched the goblet sitting on the portico and overturned it. Vladimir thought a random gust of wind had done this and joked, "Hey, what are you up to, my wayward friend, spilling expensive brandy like that?" And my foremother's spirit felt still in a corner of the dolmen. Vladimir poured some more brandy placed a little stone on top, and then put another piece of candy on top of that, and again he started talking as though to himself. We need to get a decent pathway in here. Just wait a bit. There will be a proper path to your dolmen, and that way women will come to see you. You will tell them everything they need to think about in breastfeeding an infant. Indeed, you must have had very beautiful breasts. Then Vladimir started his descent. It was late at night when he got back to the place he was staying. He sat for a while alone on the sofa in his cold apartment, binding his wounds and watching a video cassette. Someone had given him a tape to watch, which had been copied and passed around by people in various places. On the tape there was a speaker in front of a large audience made up mainly of women. He was talking about God and how strong the spirit of righteous man could be. Then he started talking about me. He said I was an ideal woman, a role model to which people should aspire. He said that I had great strength of mind and spirit, and that I was aided by the forces of light, and that now, once I became familiar with the lives of people in the usual world, I would be able to help them. He said a lot of nice things about me, and then, all at once, he said that I had not yet met a real man, and that the one I had been in contact with was not a real man. Indeed, others had been saying earlier that there was a young man in Australia who was worthy of me, that he and I would meet, and then I would meet a real man. And Vladimir, you see, he was sitting all alone there, listening to this. All this time he was trying with one hand to bind the wounds on his legs. His other hand still hurt too much from the bruises. I reached out to Vladimir at once with my ray. I wanted to warm his wounds and chase his pain away, and to somehow tell him, he never hears me when I speak to him at a distance. I thought, well, this time it might work out. Yes, I thought it might work out this time, since my longing for him was so strong. I wanted him to hear how I loved him, only him, and only he, my dearest, only he is a real man. But I got burned and thrown back to the ground. Something was preventing my ray from getting through to Vladimir. Once again I quickly aimed my ray at the room where he was sitting watching the video, and you know what I saw? There in front of him was this invisible energy mass. My foremother was kneeling right in front of him. Vladimir could not see or hear her. He just kept watching the tape. In the meantime, my foremother was warming the wounds on Vladimir's legs with her breath, as he was pouring this terribly painful cologne on his wounds. And my foremother tried speaking with him, but he was unable to hear. My foremother is so strong in spirit that nothing invisible could penetrate her. Any psychotropic weapons trained on her will explode. She will hardly pay them any attention. In any case, any attack will be repelled, and there was no way I could interfere. I could only watch. I watched and began thinking ever so quickly. What had happened? How did a situation like this come about? Why was the speaker saying such things? Did he want to help me? Was he trying to explain something? If so, what? Why was my ray so drawn to Vladimir? Naturally, I was afraid that Vladimir might take offence at the words "not a real man," and that he would be jealous of another over me. And then suddenly, oh, how painful it was! It really hurt. After Vladimir had heard the whole tape, he simply sighed and said, "What do you know? A real man. In Australia, I heard, eh? They're going to meet. Maybe then they will give me my son." My ray began trembling. It was as though everything had somehow gone dark. You see, Vladimir was not jealous. Naturally, that is not a good feeling, jealousy. But I wanted to see him jealous, at least a little. Just a teeny weeny bit. But here was Vladimir, handing me over to another with complete indifference. I could not restrain myself and started to cry. I began asking, pleading with my foremother to tell me what I had done wrong. What mistake had I made? Where had I transgressed? She did not reply until Vladimir had finished binding the last wound. Then she told me sadly, all you had to do was love, daughter dear, to think about what was good for your beloved without elevating yourself in the process. I tried to explain that I did really want only what was good, but once again she quietly said, you wanted something for yourself, daughter dear. Pictures, music, poems, and songs. It will all come to pass. Your dream is powerful, I know. It is for everyone, and for the one you love too. But now it will be more and more difficult for you to obtain earthly love. You are becoming a star, daughter dear. People may admire and love a star as a star, but not as a woman. That was the last thing my foremother said. I lost my sense of self-control. I screamed and tried to explain, to argue that I did not want to be a star, that I simply wanted to be a woman and to be loved, but nobody could hear me. Please help me. There is a lot I now understand. I am not afraid for myself. I can take care of myself. But it will take Vladimir much longer to understand, and in the meantime, listening to that kind of talk is leading him away from the truth. The distribution of that cassette must be stopped. It suggests to people, including Vladimir, that I am some sort of ideal role model, a star, and that someone else instead of him ought to be with me. I am not a star. I am a woman. I want to love whom I myself want to love. The path is not determined by me alone. My path is not determined by me alone. I was mistaken. I dreamt things would work out so that people would talk about me, dedicate verses and songs to me, that artists would draw me, and that has all come about. Whenever I dream, my dreams all come true, and this one has too. I am grateful for the verses and songs. I am grateful to the poets, but I was mistaken all along. That was how I dreamt it. The poems are needed, but I was not supposed to become a star. I wanted all that so Vladimir would look at the images, listen to the songs, and remember. So he would remember me. But I did not know this when I was dreaming it. Now I realize I am becoming a star. Everyone looks up to stars, but it is a woman they love. Anastasia, do you realize what you're asking for? There's no way to stop a cassette from being distributed, especially when it's one people copy themselves. That's not something you can control. Nobody can. You see, you cannot, but Vladimir, he's an entrepreneur, and even if it is said to be uncontrollable, he could still do something. But he does not want to do anything. He is resigned to the assumption that I am not a suitable mate for him. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. Forces of Light. Boris Moisevich, Alexander continued, forgot about everything else and went on plying Anastasia with questions such as, what are the forces of light? These, Anastasia replied, are all the bright thoughts ever produced by people. All space is filled with them. Can you freely communicate with them? Can you see them? Yes, I can. Can you answer any question confronting science today? Many of them, perhaps, but every scientist, indeed every man, can find the answers. Everything depends upon the purity of one's thoughts and the motive for asking. Could you explain certain phenomena for science? If the answer does not come to you, it means your thoughts are not sufficiently pure. Such is the law of the Creator. I will not go against it, if I feel it is not right to tell you. Is there something higher than the bright thoughts produced by man? There is, but they are just as significant. What is that? How could you define it? In a way, you are capable of relating to. Are you able to talk with him? Yes, at least sometimes. As far as I know, I talk directly with him. Is there some kind of energy that exists in the universe that we don't know about on the Earth? The greatest energy in the universe is on the Earth. We need only to understand it. Can you, Anastasia, give me at least an approximate description of this energy? Is it like a nuclear reaction? A vacuum phenomenon? The most powerful energy in the universe is the energy of pure love. I'm talking about visible, tangible energy capable of influencing technical progress, of producing heat and light, and if you like, an explosion. And I'm talking about the same thing. All your humanly established installations taken together are not able to supply light to the earth for any length of time, but the energy of love can. There you go, talking allegorically again, in some other metaphorical sense. I am talking in a literal sense as you understand it. But love is a feeling. It's not something visible. It can't be applied or even seen. Love is energy. It is reflected. It is possible to see it. Where is it reflected? How is it possible to see it? The sun, the stars, the visible planets, they are all but reflectors of this energy. The light of the sun, which gives life to everything on the earth, is created by human love. In the whole universe, the energy of love is reproduced only in the soul of man. It takes upward flight, becomes filtered and reflected, and pours itself forth from the planets of the universe as beneficial light upon the earth. Do not combustive chemical reactions take place on the sun all on their own? You only have to do a little reasoning to realize the falsity of such a conclusion. It is like, as you put it, 2 + 2. Can man control this energy? Not to any significant degree, at least for the time being. But do you know how to do it? Myself, I do not know. If I knew, my beloved would already love me. You say you can communicate with him, a being higher than the forces of light. Does he always answer you? I mean willingly. Always. And he always answers very gently, because he could not do otherwise. Could you ask him how to control the energy of love? I did ask. And to comprehend certain answers of his, one needs to have a certain level of conscious awareness and purity, which I myself do not have. I do not understand all his answers. But you will still attempt to do something to obtain this requited love. Of course I shall do something. What will you do? I shall think. Help me. I need to ask all the women out there who have ever loved, all who have or have not been loved. They will think, analyze, and produce thoughts which will appear in the dimension of the forces of light. I shall see them. I shall understand, and then I shall help everyone. Thoughts in the dimension of light are always comprehensible. Anastasia, we can't put a question to all the women in the world at once. Nobody can do that. Then ask Vladimir. He will figure out how to do it. He will find a way. But he will not do it just for me. You will have to persuade him that this is very important for all people, for him. If he feels how important it is, he will definitely do something. He will find a way of asking all the women at once. You believe so strongly in him. Why then has he not been able to love you in return? He is not to blame. I am to blame. I made many mistakes. Possibly I was in a hurry and made myself appear too fantastic to him with my abilities. Possibly he is not yet able to appreciate why his son has to be raised in surroundings that seem unusual for human beings, that is, in the forest. Possibly I should not have interfered so drastically with his customary habits, not have intruded on his conscious awareness. I know now that men really do not like that. They can even beat women for that. I should probably have waited, and he would have come to understand it all on his own. He should have felt that he is superior to me, at least in something. But I did not realize this in time. I told him that he could not see his son until he purified himself. At that moment I was thinking only of our son, about what was best for him. and I inadvertently said he would not be good for him to see his father as a dimwit. So it turned out that I was the altogether clever one, and my beloved was stupid. What kind of requited love could I dream about after that? Why then do you need to ask other women if you are so capable of analysing things yourself? I need to determine whether there really is a possibility of setting everything right. I cannot determine this by myself. I am so emotionally raw whenever I think about him. The analysis needs to be carried out calmly, through reminiscence and compassion, but I have nothing to reminisce about except him. And can you talk with him? I feel mere words are useless. Real love does not come out of words. Some kind of actions are required. But which ones? Perhaps one of the women will have the experience and the needed answer. Are you not able to reach him with your ray? I cannot even touch him now with my ray. My foremother's spirit is often right beside him. She will not permit it. I know why. End of chapter 6.